In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a larger animal by making a pinch pot. You can also hollow out the form as well. So this panda was made with one pinch pot, a solid head because it's not much thicker than my thumb. And then once the student was finished, they put an air hole in it because whenever you make a hollow form or hollow out something, you need to be able to let the air release from the piece. This penguin was also done with a pinch pot closed form like we did with the pumpkins, and it has an air hole. And then for those of you that are ambitious and want to do an even bigger animal, this one was done more clay than I need, but I wanted a little bit thicker piece for my pinch pot. And so I'm just going to take the wire tool and I'm going to cut this in half, and then I'm going to put this back in my clay bag. You can use a separate Ziploc. And then I'm going to cut this a little bit, like a quarter off the top, to use later. So this part will become my pinch pot. So remember, when you're making a pinch pot form, I noticed this is a little tall, so I'm going to cut a little bit more off. When you're making the pinch pot form like we did for the pumpkins and the tea bowls, don't try to roll it on the table. Take your nice soft clay and squish it. If you're in a spot where you can toss it, that's a good way to soften it too. And then you do it in your hand. Don't try to roll it on your slab mat. So roll it, pat it, hit your phone like I just did, and make a ball form. Then for the pinch pot, you hold it in your hand. Don't set it on the table. Poke your thumb in, pinch, turn. Now we don't want the top to go open because we're going to close this form. So the trick to that is to keep your hand tilted inward as you're turning instead of outward, because outward it will turn more into a bowl. So we want to open up the inside and make it a hollow form, but we don't want it super wide. So I'm pinching, turning. So I want it to be about the thickness of my finger. Okay? All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to close this form. Whenever you trap air, you then need to put an air hole in it to release the air, otherwise it will blow up in the firing. So again, to close it like we did with the pumpkins, I'm going to pinch, turn, and close my form. Now this is for a smaller animal, like the panda bear that has a hollow form. If you were going to do the zebra, you would need two pinch pots, one for each side that you would slip and score together. Since this is so big, sometimes it's a good idea to have either a big sponge, or if you have foam, then you can work on that. Sometimes this dries it out, so it's a good idea to put a Ziploc bag on top of that as you're working, because you don't want your clay to dry out too fast. You have bigger clay this time if you're doing it this way, but that helps too to not let your clay dry out. So it is nice to have that form. Okay, now that this is hollow, I want to make it kind of more ovoid. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to paddle it with my hand. You also have those amazing sticks. Those sticks work really good for paddling it into that oval shape. You can also roll it. Just be a little gentle because it is a hollow form. You can pat it and turn it. So there are a lot of ways that you can get that basic ovoid shape, because most of the animals that you are looking at, if you're doing a mammal, start with an ovoid shape, the bison. So that is where you're going for first, like an ovoid, not an egg necessarily, but an ovoid shape. Now for the panda, it's narrower at the top, so I'm going to use my hand and kind of pinch that narrower, and that's where the head's going to be. Now I'm not going to close that off, because if I do, I would need an air hole there and an air hole there, but I am going to pinch it into more of an egg-like form where the head of the panda goes. They don't have much of a neck, but if your creature does, you might have to do that. So then I'm going to pat it. So like I said, if you're going to make an animal that stands up like this, what you would do is you would make the hollow form, and then you would make the legs separately, and then once the legs are leather hard, then you would attach it onto your piece. Okay, so I've got that. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to work quickly, so I don't need to put it in my Ziploc, but if I wasn't, I would need to put it in there so it doesn't dry out. Now this head isn't very big, so it's not a lot thicker than my thumb, so I'm not going to worry about hollowing it out, but if you do have something thicker than your thumb, you would need to hollow out and make a tiny pinch pot, so I'm going to show you that. So to make a small pinch pot, you would again just make your ball in your hands. Don't roll it on the slab mat. And then you would just make a teeny tiny pinch pot But you'd have to remember then to put an air hole in it. This will make your piece lighter if you wanted a lighter piece. And then you can kind of pinch it closed. Doesn't even have to be all the way closed, and then attach it. So you would need to then put an air hole in this piece and this piece. So to avoid that, I'm going to just take the solid piece because it's not that thick. So again, I'm going to form it into my hand. Okay, and then I put it next to it and see, is it too big? That's pretty good size, but I adjust it. Then I look at that and I see, look at my imager picture and I see where I can pinch it or tap it to start to shape it as best I can into it. And if you have rubber or plastic or some kind of animal to look at, that is so helpful. If you have that in your house, these are all not clay-based. Those are really helpful. So if you have one around, you can. If as you start to make this, it's turning into something else, that's fine. You can switch your idea out and we can fix that in your digital notebook later. Okay, so when I look at the panda, I notice that his face, I'm gonna kind of squish this a little bit, is a little pointier towards the front for where his nose will go. And then we're gonna kind of roll with my finger where the mouth will go and pat and kind of get that basic animal shape. If you put a teeny bit of water, you can kind of pull and stretch your clay. Clay is really stretchy. We call it plastic on purpose because it's stretchy. And you can start to make that basic shape. Don't worry about nose and eyes and ears or anything like that yet. Then it's super important that you slip and score this on. So I kind of can measure and adjust. So it's score, slip, attach, smooth. Make sure you're attaching it all the way around. If you can't get your finger in there, your fingers are your best tools. But you can use the side of your stick, or I have a needle tool here, something rounded like that. Now I'm gonna pat it down a little because, like I said, panda bears don't have very big necks and the tops of their heads are a little wider. So sometimes it takes some time to adjust it. Now I also noticed that he is pretty round. I want to squish him a little bit to see where his shoulders would be. So you just kind of have to pinch and look and see how it's going to look. Okay, now for the arms and legs, I just take that other chunk of clay that I have, and the easiest thing to do is to cut it with your wire tool, or if you can use your credit card or your stick, not your stick, I'm sorry, your credit card or your scoring tool, you can do that. Or even better, just cut off with your wire tool. The nice thing about doing it this way is that you can kind of measure so they're about the same size pieces. Otherwise you can kind of just pinch it off your clay block. Okay, so obviously we're not going to do flat pieces, so you're going to squish this and form it basically into an oval like a sausage. Then you're going to roll it onto your slab mat. So when you roll, use your fingertips and roll both ways. So before I even attach the arms or legs, I'm just going to make all 4 parts. So they're really floppy. So like I said, if your creature is sitting or has short legs like a pig, then it's not necessary to let them get leather hard. But if you're making a horse or a zebra or a standing animal, you would basically make the basic forms into the shape you want them to be and let them get leather hard. Okay, just like in the video of the pig, whenever you attach something onto a piece, you don't want to just stick it on the side because you have all that thick clay. So think about an action figure or Barbie doll, and you want to cut off so you have an angled piece of surface area that would go onto the piece. So I can tell right away that that is way too long, so I'm going to cut some off. So I think I'm going to do the legs first. So I'm going to put that aside and do the legs first. So it's fatter towards or wider towards the top. So that's where you want the wider piece to go. And you're just going to slip and score that on. The clay's so flexible that I can bend it later. But make sure you're really going on the top and the bottom when you slip and score onto your work. So it's really attached. So that's why it's important at this stage to really get that clay attached. Now, if it's skinny there, like too thin, I can push this against it, but you can add some weight onto it. For those of you that wrestle and need to get your weight up, this is how you add weight. Okay, later we will carve some away when it's leather hard and you can lose some weight. So don't, make sure again that you aren't making this hollow where you would trap air. So if you're doing this, just take solid clay, and this is the modeling stage of clay, and you can add on more weight. So where the hip will be and how it attaches to the leg. Because sometimes you don't know when you're rolling the coil. So that just helps to make it. And then you can go ahead and pinch. And then this part, I'm just putting my finger here to support it, and I'm flattening where its foot would be. Happy fat panda. Okay. Have you ever seen a panda in real life at a zoo? They're super cute. Okay, so now I'm gonna put on the other panda leg, and I can tell already that that is not thick enough, but I'm just gonna slip and score it all the way around. If you don't, guys, it might stick now, but in the transport or in the kiln, it could come off. And then I'm gonna take some of that excess clay and give him some more muscle and fat and stuff around his leg to make him look more panda-like. So as long as it's wet like this, you can still do this. You can even do this at the leather hard stage. So when we get to the leather hard stage, you might be doing some more additive sculpture there. Now you can also add this to the top of the piece. So like think about your quadriceps. When I do figure sculpture with students, we often add muscle later and then carve muscle. Okay, and then this foot I'm gonna have stick up. So I'm using my finger to support it and my other finger to make that. So even though I'm making a panda here, you can do this with a lot of different shapes. Okay, so I think this piece here would be good for two panda arms. So you can also pad it if you don't feel like cutting it off so that you get that shape that would attach. And you might want to kind of shape it into its basic form first. You can also do that later. And then definitely score and slip that onto your work. Your panda could hold bamboo. If it's the realistic panda or something, that might be kind of fun. You can make a baby panda next to it. If you're ambitious, you could make two pandas or a family. So again, I'm going for the realistic one here, but later on, you can make one that is stylized in a similar way, or a much smaller version. This one, I'm gonna have the panda arm come down a little bit. So make sure you're really attaching it. And again, you can carve some of the details later. Okay, so now I'm gonna add the ears. So panda ears are really easy. They're easier than the pig ears. So you just take and you roll a little ball of clay and flatten it. And then I like to cut off part of that. And then even though they might just attach, it's super important that you always slip and score, especially this little stuff. And then it's really hard to get in there with my finger. So if you use your end of your stick or something, you can get in there and attach those other pieces to it. I might end up making that bigger later. So you might have to go in later and do some details and attach it. So then you're gonna slip and score and attach. Don't forget to attach. Okay, now I'm gonna, before I put it in my bag, I'm gonna look. Okay, so I can smooth here a little bit here, but I can also take some soft clay and fill in some cracks and wrinkles that I worry about might make the piece come apart. So if you just take some really soft clay, make sure you're not trapping any air, and just smooth that around and get that basic form. And I'm not worrying about this being perfect or super realistic yet, because in another video I'll show you the next steps for when that piece is leather hard. So it is very important that you put an air hole in it. You can wait till it's leather hard, but if I see a big piece like this and I can't easily see the air hole, and sometimes I'll even test with a needle tool, and if I can't get my needle tool in there, then it is not gonna get fired, okay, until you're able to do that. And that's why it's really good to keep it leather hard. So then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put that in my Ziploc, If you are worried about it getting squished,